This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Another very important show. I urge you all of our great patriots, supporters, and friends, to share this radio show. We need to get a much broader audience. We're on in about 55 stations around the country on Radio America, a great network that allows me to tell the truth. And we need to coalesce the American people because we're coming upon a very critical period in our nation's history. We're already in it. We are in a revolutionary period. Thank God it's not violent. Thank God it's not bloody. But you can see the coup d'etat, which is now being attempted by the Democrats and by the left. And what is important here is that notwithstanding the fact that the president did not commit any impeachable offense with regard to the Ukraine, notwithstanding the fact that he had Rudy Giuliani, who sometimes has one too many martinis before he decides what he's going to do, notwithstanding the fact that Giuliani has had virtually every one of his associates indicted, some of them convicted. And I said this on the last show, the president hangs around the wrong people. He needs to learn a lesson. You are who you associate with. Giuliani, I don't believe, is a bad person, but I believe he's past his prime. He doesn't know what he's doing. And just as the president was cleared from Russian collusion, then he gets into this Ukrainian collusion mess. It was unnecessary. Joe Biden, frankly, is a has-been. I mean, his health is so bad he can barely speak. Just in the last few weeks, he referred to 89 candidates running against him for president. He clearly has dementia. He's probably not going to make his way to the primary. I think he's probably going to have a stroke. I don't wish him any harm, but it looks like the guy's in serious trouble. So why would you engage in asking the Ukrainian president as a favor to look into the Bidens when, in fact, you're home free and clear? It's a little bit like Richard Nixon, back during Watergate, having his people break into the Watergate complex across the street from Howard Johnson's Motor Lodge and restaurant. I remember I used to live right there. And he was up 30 points on George McGovern then as president. I mean, relax, President Trump. Okay, you've done some great things for this country. The American people, by and large, love you. You don't need to be so reflexive. Forrest Gump, the great movie with a number of great actors in it, including my friend Gary Sinise. Stupid is as stupid does. Okay, this was stupid, but it was not impeachable. But there's a method to the Democrats' madness. We're going to talk about this with my great friend and patriot Alan Keyes, who's going to be on during the third segment. I want to get his take on it. He's a brilliant individual. He ran for the president 3 times. Unfortunately, he was not president. Obama was. He would have been a great president. But they're now trying to take out Vice President Trump Pence as well. You can see that last week with some of the testimony. And these are deep state actors that came on to testify. They play both sides of the street. They have no backbone. They have no moral courage. They just are like jellyfish. They flop around to save themselves, like most lawyers, frankly, in our court system, and like most judges. They think about themselves before they think about their clients or the American people. Well, if you take out Trump in impeachment, and if you can get Pence, who becomes president? You guessed it, Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. And, there's an irony here, too. I have dedicated the last few shows to the Roger Stone trial, and he was rightfully convicted. He was not wrongfully convicted. There's no excuse for lying under oath to Congress. I don't care who's in charge. And at that time that he lied about his connections with WikiLeaks and his connections with Julian Assange and said he didn't have documents dealing with intermediaries, whether or not there were intermediaries, and that, of course, There probably weren't, certainly not my client, Jerry Corsi. He wasn't an intermediary. That's why he was not indicted. He told the truth, and we got him off, and he was rightfully off because Jerry's a great patriot, and he wasn't going to testify against the president with false testimony, as Mueller had tried to squeeze him to do, to suborn perjury. But this is the kind of thing that needs to be said, is that Stone, with all of his problems, okay, and I've sued him 5 times for defaming Corsi and me, and counting, I might add, as well as his sidekick, Michael Caputo, who was thrown out of the courtroom last week for disrespect towards the jury after they ruled. He's actually right. He's the one who said that Pelosi was behind this, that, in fact, they're trying to get rid of Trump and Pence and put her in office. Now, what we're seeing here is an attempted coup d'etat. And if they cannot remove Trump and Pence, they want to weaken them enough that they will lose the 2020 election. That obviously happened back in the year 2000 with Bill Clinton, is that with all of his scandals, the 40 scandals and the impeachment, Republicans never went for the kill, so to speak, the legal kill. They just wanted to smear the president with Monica Lewinsky. And yes, he should have been smeared with it in the appropriate way. It was, frankly, at that time, not the impeachable offense. I said that. What was the impeachable offense was taking bribes from China, Filegate, Travelgate, IRSgate, and everything else he did, 40 scandals. And they wouldn't impeach on that. In fact, I worked with Bob Barr and Dave Shippers, the impeachment manager, to do that. But, of course, Newt Gingrich, who was compromised, he was having an affair at the time. He was Speaker of the House. He was doing some of the things that Clinton said that Clinton had been doing himself. He wouldn't push too hard. They just wanted to weaken Clinton. So even if they don't get Trump and Pence, what they're trying to do is to sway those independent voters such that they will vote for a Democrat in the 2020 presidential elections and in the congressional elections. We're going to talk about with Alan about that, too, because he's an expert on Congress and elections. He tries to help candidates get elected, Republican candidates, Libertarian candidates, other people of faith, those kinds of things. And that's what they're trying to do. So keep that in mind. This is also very troubling, and I ask you to go to freedomwatchusa.org. Join the coalition of the Jewish right. I am a proud Jew. I am a proud Christian. I am a Jewish Christian. You all know that. Jesus was a rabbi. The Last Supper was Passover. He was celebrating Passover before he was crucified the next day. In the words of my friend and one of the great gospel singers out there, Marty Goetz, who's a Messianic Jew from Cleveland originally, and I urge you to look at his music on the internet. I mean, it's fantastic. He has a better voice than Josh Groban. Jesus was the truest Jew there ever was. There was nothing inconsistent with his coming on behalf of the Father and showing the people in a human form what the Father wanted them to know. And the division between Christian and Jews all these years is it's not only unnecessary, but it was created for political reasons, much like the division in this country today. But I'm very, very upset, and I'm very dismayed at the Jewish left. And I can criticize the Jewish left because, you see, I am Jewish. It's like Alan Keyes can be critical of African Americans on the left, or Justice Thomas can be critical where he accused them actually of high-tech lynching way back when with Anita Hill. I can do it. And what really troubles me, and I think there's going to be a backlash of anti-Semitism, and that's what I'm trying to head off, is that just like during the Bolshevik Revolution, where you had Marx and Trotsky and others on the Jewish left who deposed the Tsar. Okay, the Tsar certainly was a bad person, but the Bolsheviks were a whole lot worse. What we have today is the Jewish left in Congress doing the same thing. You've got Adam Schiff. You've got Gerald Nadler. You've got Chuck Schumer. You've got Senator Blumenthal. I could go on and on and on. This is a huge embarrassment to me because, you see, Jewish people aren't this way. Jewish people are generally conservative. They're not on the left, but the American Jewish left has become radical. They'll support the Palestinians and radical Muslims before they will their own people. They're the kind of people that would get on boxcars in World War II thinking they were going to summer camp and wind up getting killed in the Holocaust. I want to point this out to people because I am concerned. that there's going to be a backlash of anti-Semitism. And I'll tell you what they're also doing. The Jewish left in Israel is now waging the same kind of witch hunt and coup d'etat against Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's going to be indicted shortly. The prosecutor said that. Now, look, Netanyahu, I've been critical of him. I think he's weak. I think, frankly, he allowed Hamas to grow. He allowed Hezbollah to get powerful. He took little to no action with regard to Iran other than some incursions into Syria. They now have a serious problem with Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. And he has a big mouth. He talks big but acts little. Ironically, he's from Philadelphia, my birthplace. He spent time there. He was born in Israel, but he went there with his dad. His dad was a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. So he sounds good because he has an American accent, a Philadelphia accent. But you know what they're trying to indict him for and convict him for is petty stuff. His wife hired a caterer. He told people in the press that he would think of them favorably if they did certain things, okay, these kinds of things. It's the Jewish left in Israel, which is also destabilizing Israel. And consequently, watch what's going on in Israel. It's very similar to what's happening in the United States with the Jewish left here. Now, I'm going to get articles on Right Wing Watch and articles all over the place from Mediate and George Soros, a self-hating Jew, Bernie Sanders, a self-hating Jew who took his honeymoon in Moscow. They're going to call me anti-Semite. I'm not anti-Semite. I love my people. And that's why I'm standing up now and I'm saying, the world, do not believe that these people, that these traitors represent the Jewish people. They do not. And that's why we have to fight back. So go to freedomwatchusa.org. Join the coalition of the Jewish right. Join Freedom Watch's Justice League. Be courageous. We have many great Jewish heroes over world history. Golda Meir, Moshe Dayan in Israel, many in the United States, in France. 4 presidents and prime ministers, Jewish, helped Israel survive before the United States even intervened to save them. I'll be right back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, but give deep thought to what I'm saying right now.
Fearless.
He's claiming he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I'm back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Let's talk about Roger Stone just briefly, okay? As I wrote last week, and you can go to freedomwatchusa.org, if we conservatives are to have any say, if we're to try to change the way the legal system has degenerated into a cesspool, if we're going to save this country and bring back constitutional principles, and again, Alan Keyes is an expert on the Constitution, we'll talk to him about that, then we have to keep our own house in order. You cannot tolerate lying under oath. You cannot tolerate threatening material witnesses. There's been so much Kool-Aid out there about Roger Stone, and the person who perpetrates it the most is Tucker Carlson on Fox News. He's really doing a disservice. He tried to tamper with the jury during the Stone trial. He's lucky he wasn't hauled in and held in criminal contempt. He could have been. Even though I don't care for this judge, Amy Berman Jackson, she's far left, she did conduct a fair trial. She was under the spotlight. She had to. And early on, Tucker Carlson, who founded the Daily Caller, I believe had one of his reporters write a defamatory article about Dr. Jerry Corsi, claiming he was involved in some kind of fraud with a doctor in Florida. So Tucker comes on nearly every night plugging Roger Stone. I got to wonder why he's so close to Roger Stone. I'd like him to explain that. What do they have in common? Because, I can see little in common, but maybe we need to look into what Tucker Carlson does have in common with Roger Stone, because he's doing a great disservice to the conservative movement. We have to be pure. We have to be above the slime in Washington, D.C., and we need to hold everybody accountable. Now, let me talk about how we're going to hold people accountable, because it's not going to happen at the Justice Department. Note that, and I've said this before, James Comey was recommended for prosecution twice in the last few months by the Obama-appointed Inspector General Michael Horowitz. Take that to the bank. Andrew McCabe, Deputy FBI Director, was also recommended for prosecution. Nothing has happened. Why has nothing happened? Because in Washington, D.C., it's mutual assured destruction. Why hasn't Brenner and Clapper been indicted? Brennan, former CIA director, James Clapper, director of national intelligence. Clapper lied under oath to Congress, just like Stone did. He said there was no mass surveillance when there was, violating the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. I got 2 preliminary injunctions enjoining that with Judge Richard Leon, who found this to be almost Orwellian, like 1984. Clapper, not indicted for lying to Congress. So the fact that Stone got what he deserved does not let the others off the hook. And somebody needs to do it. And who needs to do it? The People's Justice Department. That's Freedom Watch. It's not going to be Judicial Watch that does it. Under Tom Fitton, as I've said before, who's not a lawyer, who's very jealous of my being a lawyer, who does everything he can to harm me. And that's a long story, which I'll tell someday on a full show. And it's been going on for 16 years because he fears the competition. Sure, they have a lot of money. They have $110 million in net worth. But the reality is that they mostly file Freedom of Information Act cases. You never lose a Freedom of Information Act case. You'll always get documents. I, Larry Klayman, take risks. I'm trying to use the court system to bring about justice. If you don't ever attempt to win, and if you're not afraid of losing, okay, then you'll never win. That's the point. I remember one time I lost the club championship when I was a kid. I was going into Duke University because I was so worried about losing. I missed 2 2-foot putts on the last 2 holes. But you can't be afraid. You just have to do your job and get it done. And that's why, watch what happens. We've already indicted Robert Mueller. He's going to be tried in the springtime. The Bidens, we're going to commission a citizens grand jury and seek the indictment of him and his son for the bribery that went on in the Ukraine, the real Ukraine scandal. Shifty Schiff, Adam Schiff, we're going to seek his indictment. We're going to seek the indictment of Comey. Bill Barr wouldn't do it. Mutual assured destruction. They've got dirt on everybody. Brennan and Clapper. That's why they're not indicted. They have mass surveillance on everybody. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, why did he flip on Obamacare? What kind of dirt did they have on him? Jeff Sessions, completely worthless attorney general who did nothing. Now he wants to run for Senate again in Alabama. I hope that the people in Alabama throw him out on his rear end because he's a totally worthless human being in terms of what he does. Andrew McCabe, you got Strzok, Page, Orr, the rest of them. We're going to have them all indicted. Hillary Clinton, the Obamas. Join Freedom Watch's Justice League. We are the People's Justice Department. We will do what Judicial Watch will not do. We will stick our neck out. Now, we're going to be right back with Alan Keyes, one of the truly great Americans, probably the most intelligent person ever to run for the President of the United States in modern era. And I'm very privileged to have him on our show today. He's a good friend and a real American patriot. I'll be right back.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with my very good friend, one of the great American patriots. As I said earlier, if Alan Keyes, Ambassador Alan Keyes, who was UN ambassador under Ronald Reagan, 3-time presidential candidate in 1996, 2000, 2008, 2-time, of course you can correct me if I'm wrong, U.S. Senate candidate, once against Obama in Illinois. Actually, he raised the issue, Obama's ineligibility to be president under natural-born citizen. He was not a natural-born citizen. Of course, everybody gets vilified for that raises that issue. A columnist for WorldNet Daily, a place that's dear to my heart as well. I write there, and also a radio talk show host. Just a really great person and patriot. If he had won as president, he would have been our most intelligent modern president in my lifetime. But that did not happen. Instead, we're privileged to have him on our show today. And I want to ask you, Alan, how do you assess this whole impeachment charade? Where is it going? What's the Democrat strategy? What do they hope to accomplish? And what are they accomplishing, if anything?
Well, Larry, I think it's kind of ironic. First of all, there's no there. That's good sign, right? There's no there. They have no case. And I think they know they have no case. One of them was even quoted, was it Al Green or somebody quoted as saying that we got to impeach him because otherwise he'll be reelected. But if you think about that, that means that they are only motivated by political gain, ambition, and strategy, right? No other motivation behind it. And nothing that has been presented at these hearings, so-called, this farcical, one-sided mess that they've been sponsoring that totally violates due process of law and extends no constitutional protection to the president as a person, which is required by the Constitution. The whole mess is making a mockery of the process and, of course, of the Democrats. So I think that if they continue it, as they appear determined to do, then it has to be rebuffed, obviously, by the Senate, and possibly could be called into account before that. We could talk about it. And I think that they will be shellacked. People forget that if you go for impeachment and fail and so forth, no party has ever benefited from that. They always get hurt. And this party, I think, deserves to be reduced back to nothing. They have no respect for the country, the Constitution, the rule of law. They're just out for power, and I think the whole way they've handled themselves in this process shows that that's true.
You know, there's a certain irony here. I don't know if it's irony is the right word, but I don't understand why Mitch McConnell, Majority Leader of the Senate, hasn't ordered one of his chieftains, like Lindsey Graham on the Judiciary Committee, to begin an investigation of this Ukrainian corruption. I don't understand Bill Barr didn't take the lead on this as Attorney General, because he could have done it. There wouldn't have been any issue of alleged collusion, even though that's phony. And if, for instance, in my view, if the Senate was to start an investigation right now and subpoena Joe Biden and his son, they would run for the exits. They would be looking to get into boats to swim out of Washington, D.C. and into the Atlantic someplace. What do you think? Do you think they should have done that? I mean, they're sitting here taking punches rather than punching back.
I was reading a headline this morning that Lindsey Graham has stepped forward to demand that Biden documents be produced from the State Department, right? It may be a step in that direction, but the thing that I find amazing is that they don't seem to appreciate the simple logic. If the president was simply doing his job, right, then there was no malfeasance. What is his job? To see to it that the laws are faithfully executed. People always forget, and I don't believe in this business of making a distinction between the Attorney General and the President. The President is the executive branch. He's the only individual in the government who actually has vested in him the power of a branch of government. All the rest is distributed among 9 people or hundreds of people, but in his case, it's only one. And he must answer for the whole executive branch. That means that his duties come first. He is the focus. So if somebody has committed a high crime or misdemeanor, the president can go ask any head of state he feels like to please cooperate. We think you might have information about this criminal behavior we suspect. Could you provide it to us? And to say that he can't do that because it might be to his political advantage is just plain stupid.
Well, I agree with you, Alan. He is the chief law enforcement officer, but right. You know, the way things have been cast by the Democrats, by the media, they create this false impression that there's some independence inside of the executive branch upon which the president is the head.
Why hasn't somebody come out and said that? The president ought to say it. I mean, but aside from that, it needs to be said by every Republican in the Congress and every Republican in the Senate. This whole thing is based on a false premise. It's the premise that there are multiple departments and multiple heads that answer for the use and abuse of executive power. There are not. There is only one. It's a unitary executive. Everybody knows that. And the president answers for the whole thing. And he can answer for it, by the way, using whatever individuals he feels appropriate to go talk to other people. This whole stupid business that somehow or another Rudy Giuliani, that was wrong. He couldn't do that, and he can't send anybody out. He has to send out the Secretary of State or the ambassador or whoever is claiming to take president. It's a lie, and you and I both know it. Presidents have always used personal envoys. They call them by different names and give them different titles, and they don't have to be confirmed by the Senate. It's happened since George Washington's day. And if they can do that, they can also do the final thing, which is ask questions themselves that they believe are essential to performing their function. So he did nothing wrong.
There's an interesting contrast. So I made reference to it, in my opening statement, so to speak. What's going on in Israel right now? For instance, they have an independent Ministry of Justice over in Israel. It's not part of their executive branch. They have just said they're going to indict the chief prosecutor, Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, I'm a Zionist. I'm a supporter of Israel, a strong supporter of Israel, and I think that these are trumped-up charges, no pun intended, with Netanyahu. I've been critical of Netanyahu because I don't think he's strong enough towards Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. He's allowed this cancer to grow. He hasn't done what he said he was going to do. He's got a real good oratory. He comes from Philadelphia, my birthplace. He spent time there with his dad when his dad was a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He has an American accent. But what's going on in Israel right now is very similar to what's going on here in the United States. But under their so-called constitution, their Ministry of Justice is not part of the executive branch. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it proves, I was talking to somebody about that just this morning, because I think it proves the eminent wisdom of our founders. These guys were really smart. The more I've studied them and read into not just the works they did, but the ratifying convention speeches, their letters and stuff, they were brilliant men, and women, by the way, in terms of the input that some of the wives made. But leave that aside. They made a provision such that our executive does not stand under any threat just because he's accused. And that makes perfect sense, because unless you're some stupid, follow-hearted Machiavellian, you can see that government by accusation is inherently unjust. And so the whole idea that you just have to accuse somebody to paralyze their ability to perform in their government function, which is stupid on the face of it, don't you think? That's ridiculous. And it allows for a process that has no presumption of innocence. Well, it damages the body politic. It damages the whole country, not just the individual under attack. And it can be done at any time, just in order to cause problems and maybe even, as I think Carolyn Glick wrote, stage a coup d'etat, which essentially this amounts to getting the prime minister out after, because there has been no actual reading of the electorate that allows for that to happen. So, yes, I think it's a sign of really bad weakness in the Constitution of Israel, perhaps related, by the way, to the fact that it was written by people who did not have the kind of barrier the founders had to allowing anything that smacked of dictatorship to go unchallenged in the structure of government. There should always be some check on that, and they put no check on these investigators who can paralyze the executive in Israel.
There is an irony there as well, to use that term again, is that Israel, whether they have indicted and convicted prime ministers, justly or, in any other respect, they have at least been able to address corruption at the highest level. And we have never seemed to be able to do that. Now, with Trump, we don't have corruption. Okay, we have a legitimate use of his executive power, but Israel has actually removed prime ministers, and one of the last ones, Omar, was thrown in prison for taking bribes. But Netanyahu, what is he accused of? His wife getting a caterer, for the prime ministerial mansion, for talking to people who are in the media and saying that, I hope I get favorable coverage. It's ridiculous. But this is a worldwide effort to destabilize by the left, conservative and right-wing governments.
Definitely true. The other thing that strikes me is that we suffered in this country, and I think part of why our impeachment removal process, the trial and impeachment process, have not served its proper function. And that's because I don't think that we have yet had, particularly at the presidential level, any impeachment that thought through the role of the Chief Justice. And so the process has been pursued without any regard for due process of law that is enforced in a way that has integrity. I mean, this.
Well, of course, Alan, I don't know what you think of this Chief Justice, but I feel very uncomfortable having him preside over the impeachment trial in the Senate with regard to Donald Trump.
But we have no choice. And the only thing, I'm not talking about Roberts in particular now. I'm talking about the fact, and Hamilton actually refers to it, I think, in Federalist 65, that what they did after debating whether the Supreme Court should do it, and they decided, no, you couldn't have that because then the Supreme Tribunal on appeal, if they were then taken at law after they had been removed, would be the same people who had adjudged guilt in the first place, and that would not be right? It would be a foregone conclusion. That's step number one. He rejected it on those accounts. But he referred to what did happen as looking at what you would hope to get from the court in the way of integrity about what the requirements of the law must be in handling both the decision as to whether sufficient evidence is there and the due process in the trial itself. That's why they put the Chief Justice in there. And that means he has a responsibility in the run-up to the trial, which is the same as any trial judge. At some point, he has to make a judgment about whether the people preparing the prosecution have acted within the law and prepared evidence sufficient to bound over the defendant for trial. And nobody thinks this through, including the Chief Justice himself, who, regardless of his personality, I'm not sure I'm willing to say that Justice Roberts is party to the travesty, the deep violation of due process and respect for the Constitution that's taking place in the House. But his silence makes him a party to it. And it's disgraceful, and it's deeply...
Well, Alan, we have about a minute left, but I wonder, going back, and I've said this before, we know about the mass surveillance on the American people by the intel agencies, the deep state Obama intel agencies. What do they perhaps have on Roberts that caused him to flip on Obamacare at the last minute? Is this why he's moved left in recent years? I don't know.
I don't know.
But something that needs to be looked into. What do they have on the guy?
My problem with Roberts and others who are of that stamp is that they seem to be weather vanes, really. They're not people who are acting, particularly on a certain range of issues, on the grounds of deep respect for the premises and principles of the Constitution and the intention with which
Alan,
these institutions...
we have short on time. I'm going to ask, I want you to come back really soon because you are an expert on the Constitution, and I want you to talk about judges in this country because that's something that's dear to my heart, and I see them as, frankly, abdicating their powers of protecting us from the tyranny of the two branches of government. But I want to thank you, my good friend, for everything you've done and everything you will do. God bless you.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now for the verdict section of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Another judicial outrage this week. And I've been talking about the fact that the Trump judges are a little better. And that's what I want to get back into with Dr. Keyes, Alan, my friend, in a subsequent show very soon. Because these judges are our protectors. They are our most important public servants in principle, but they've advocated that. And when the revolution breaks out, and I say this figuratively, not actually, they should be the first taken to the guillotines because they are getting us into this hot water that we're in right now, and they're letting the country sink further. And there's one judge, a Trump judge, recent Trump judge, Trevor McFadden, I've talked about before. Somehow the cases that I brought for Ryan Bundy and for two witnesses in the Bundy prosecution in Nevada, Stephen Stewart and Rick Lavellian, got in front of Trevor McFadden. Now, first I said, oh, great, a Trump judge. Maybe we'll get some kind of fair decision. But these judges are scared of controversial issues, and they protect their own. Because we had sued the FBI, the Bureau of Land Management, James Comey, others, for the violation of the Bundys' constitutional rights. We sued prosecutors for putting on false evidence, for attempting to suborn perjury, for covering up a scandal at the Bureau of Land Management where there were actually kill lists on the heads of the Bundys. Now, McFadden, when I first filed the case for Ryan Bundy, transfers it to Las Vegas. So, and obviously we don't want the case heard there, because there you have the same judges, Gloria Navarro, who allowed the prosecutions to go on in the first place, even though she bailed out at the end to save her own skin. So I recrafted the case for Ryan Bundy, and I took out any defendant who was in Nevada and only alleged that the people in Washington who had ordered the illegal standoff, who had orchestrated the malicious prosecution, the withholding of evidence, the line, and everything else, that they be held accountable. So he dismissed that case too. That's up on appeal. Then I brought a case for Rick Lavellian and Stephen Stewart. These two guys who came to the aid of the Bundys just simply to peacefully protest. They came and risked their lives. The government, when they ultimately put on a case, didn't even present any evidence with regard to Lavellian and Stewart. They just grouped them in with all the other protesters, in violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution, and also just their general Bill of Rights. So there was no basis to even have them in the case, but they were incarcerated for nearly 2 years without just cause. The lawyers who represented Lavellian and Stewart at the time didn't even bother to do a closing argument. They just walked off. That's how clear it was that they were going to be acquitted. And yet this Judge Trevor McFadden, a Trump appointee, dismisses that case too. And you know what he uses as an excuse? We talked about that. I'm going to write my column this week about this. The Twomey case, where the Supreme Court, this is John Roberts and company, saying that if a judge decides that the case is not plausible, the judge can take it away from the jury and dismiss the case, him or herself. That's unbelievable. Because you see, our founding fathers created the jury system in civil cases. Before that, in England, we only had it for capital offense cases. And of course, that was cooked with King George III, which is why we fought the revolution and declared independence. But this is something that has given these judges power to play God. And I've got it up on appeal right now. When that decision came down, I appealed it in less than 5 minutes. And I'm hopeful that we get somebody up on the appellate court that'll have reason. And I want this whole issue. I doubt that's going to happen, frankly, at the D.C. Circuit. It's ultra-leftist. Even the Trump judges lean left that are up there right now. And the Trump can stop crowing about the judges that he put in power, because he rubber-stamped what was given to him by the Federalist Society, the establishment Republicans. He doesn't even know who he appointed. And people like Trevor McFadden, frankly, are subverting the Constitution and doing little better than the Obama and Clinton judges. So I want you to go to Cliven Bundy Legal Defense Fund.org, contribute to that private legal defense fund. We're also in court in March. I filed the briefs to have the dismissal of their indictments affirmed, and we need your help. But this is a problem in our judiciary. It's more than a problem. And it's why we are headed into, and I'm trying to prevent that, another violent revolution. Because if those judges don't stand up for us, what's the alternative? I'm not going to lead it. I'm not going to advocate it, but there are others out there who probably will. I'll be back next week with Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until that time, go to our website, freedomwatchusa.org. Support us. Contribute to our cause. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless America. And God save America.